I'm Dr. Sandra Brown. I'm an ophthalmologist in North Carolina, and I have no financial conflicts of interest. I'd like to talk to you today about biological eye drops and to clear up some misconceptions. Let's define what we mean by biological eye drops. These are eye drops that contain proteins or other compounds that are derived from human reproductive tissues, specifically amniotic fluid or human placenta. In the upper left-hand corner is a photograph of a human placenta, and I've shown you the structures of a couple of key proteins, which are often referenced in the dry eye protein literature: epidermal growth factor, transforming growth factor beta 1, collagen type 2, and there are many other proteins, collagens, as well as high hyaluronic acid, which can be derived from human placenta. How do you get from a placenta to a bottle of eye drops? Well, there are many trademarked processes, and the manufacturers are not eager to share them. However, to get from a solid structure like dried placenta to a bottle of eye drops requires very substantial amount of manipulation of the tissue. The proteins of interest have a couple of specific functions, and you will typically see them described on web pages as cytokines, chemokines, growth factors, collagen, or hyaluronic acid. It's important to understand that in order for these proteins to be biologically active, the protein must be folded into a specific three-dimensional shape. And you can see one way that scientists will diagram proteins on the right with different colors of the amino acid chain and then arrows indicating direction. And the folds actually identify exactly where that amino acid chain is kinked and twisted back on itself. If the protein should unfold for any reason, even if it is intact, it is not going to have any biological function. The proteins have to be dissolved in something, some sort of liquid, which we call the vehicle. And the typical vehicle would be glycerin, saline, or other artificial tear ingredients. One key marketing feature of biological tears is that they do not contain preservatives. Where did this idea come from? Well, it came from something that many of us are familiar with: autologous serum tears. Autologous serum tears are made from a patient's own blood, and there are numerous case reports and small case series which show autologous serum tears to have significant clinical benefit, particularly in conditions such as neurotrophic keratitis, limbal stem cell deficiency, or other corneal diseases with poor healing or instability. Autologous is a really important word in that description because it means that the patient donates it to themselves. Your blood turns into an eye drop that you use on your eye. The Food and Drug Administration does not regulate autologous substances in the same way as drugs. Otherwise, autologous serum tears would actually be illegal. You may be a target patient population for biological tears. The typical patient that the manufacturers are reaching out to would be someone who might benefit from autologous serum tears, but faces challenges obtaining them. Patients who failed mainstream treatments, but also the advertising is very heavily slanted towards individuals who might be interested in a so-called regenerative or biological or natural approach to chronic disease management. This is the heart of the talk. I want to address with you 5 common misconceptions about biological eye drops. First, that they are fully FDA approved. Second, that they are proven effective through clinical trials. Third, that they are prescribed by your eye doctor. Fourth, that they are regulated like an over-the-counter eye drop. And fifth, that they are proven to remain sterile during use. So let's launch into each one of these 5 misconceptions. Misconception number 1. Biological eye drops are fully FDA approved. There are no fully FDA-approved eye drops containing proteins derived from human reproductive tissue or fluid. We should all just pause on this slide for a moment and really let that fact embed in our brains. Just in case you don't believe me, I'm going to introduce you to my new favorite website, Daily Med. This is an example of a listing in Daily Med for Restasis. If you look at the Restasis listing, you show that the category is human prescription drug label, and the marketing status is new drug application. Well, the category of human prescription drug label seems pretty self-evident, but what's the marketing status of new drug application? I mean, it's an application. Does that mean that it's actually been approved? Well, this is just how the FDA talks about these things, and I am going to put together another PowerPoint lecture that explains that in more detail. But for now, just roll with the idea that a fully FDA-approved drug is going to show human prescription drug label and new drug application on its daily med listing. How are you going to get a drug fully FDA-approved? The drug has to survive the new drug application process, or the NDA process. There are 4 steps to this. First of all, you have to show some plausible laboratory or animal studies that suggest that the drug that you're proposing might actually do what you think it's going to do. Then you have to do phase 1 trials on humans. This is purely about safety. Nobody cares whether the drug does anything good. They only care whether it does something bad. So this is performed on a relatively small number of subjects. Phase 2 involves proving that the drug actually does something positive, and also it's used to determine dosage. So in the eye drop world, the things that are generally varied would be the concentration of the drug inside the vehicle and the frequency of the dosing. The final step would be the phase 3 trial, which utilizes a larger population, and the purpose of that trial is to prove that there are no unexpected adverse effects and that the drug works better than current standard treatments. My favorite kind of clinical trial is the placebo-controlled trial. In this trial, one group of research patients receives an eye drop that does not contain any active ingredients, only the vehicle. And the second group receives an eye drop that does contain the active ingredients that are being studied, and you compare the response of the 2 groups. This is really a critical study design because you always have to ask yourself in eye drops, what is doing the work, the drug or the vehicle? And I thought I'd share the pretty funny story of Restasis, which has been on the market for a long time. And Restasis was actually originally not approved by the Food and Drug Administration. And the reason why was because it turned out that the vehicle, which was briefly marketed under the name of Refresh Endura, was really a phenomenal dry eye drop. So the FDA said, hey, forget the cyclosporin, just sell Refresh Endura. Well, Allergan had spent a huge amount of money on this drug, and they didn't want to have that happen. So what they did was they went back and they sliced the pie of their data differently, and they were able to tease out a relatively small number of phase 3 human subjects that showed benefit from Restasis that was greater than benefit from Refresh Endura, and those were the moderate to severe dry eye patients. So they were able to get the drug labeled and marketed for moderate to severe dry eye, and then immediately, of course, it was prescribed off-label like mad for every possible degree of severity of dry eye. But Refresh Endura actually was a terrific eye drop. I was living in Panhandle, Texas at the time, and I was using it myself because it's super dry there. I was really sad when it was taken off the market, which was a complete strategic marketing move on the part of Allergan. So thinking about that daily med label, what you have to understand is that Miracle Liquid is not a labeling option. If you are a manufacturer of biological eye drops that are being extracted from placenta or amniotic fluid, the very first problem you have is that you have to deliver a consistent range of concentration of specific proteins. And those proteins have to remain in biologically active form. When I think about this, I always think about that old French description about their very fine wine. They say, only God knows what's in this bottle. I'd like to turn that around for biological eye drops and say, God only knows what's in this bottle. There are additional hassles. The drug has to remain active for the duration of labeled use, which means that the proteins can't unfold or break down spontaneously, which is a pretty good trick if you're storing it at room temperature. And then the drug has to remain sterile for the duration of labeled use. Well, you probably can't throw some of those stronger preservatives in there because they may actually cause protein unfolding or breakdown. And once again, if you're storing a non-preserved drop for 90 days at room temperature, you're really inviting a lot of bacterial contamination. I really love the Daily Med search engine because it's so easy. If you want to check yourself, feel free. Just type into your search engine Daily Med, pick a name, and it'll pop right up. Click on the first link, and it will take you to what you need to know about Bepreve. So go ahead, type in Daily Med, and then your biological eye drop of choice, and you will not find anything coming up with a human prescription drug label. What about oxyrvate? Oxyrvate is a protein. It's a growth factor protein. It does show with a human prescription drug label. Notice the new type of marketing status, a biological licensing application. The marketing name is Oxervate TM 0.002%. It's a recombinant human growth factor. It's produced by genetically engineered E. coli. It's a single protein of defined concentration, packaged in single-use vials, stored frozen, kept in a bottle, discard after 12 hours. It has an elaborate pipette installation system with a long list of instructions about how to use it to prevent contamination. And this is a medication which is made in a lab, not a processing facility. Comparing Oxervate to biological eye drops, the FDA knows what's in the bottle. Oxervate has been proven effective for a specific condition, neurotrophic keratitis, and the dispensing system is specifically designed to prevent contamination. With biological eye drops, none of that is true. Moving on to misconception number 2, biological eye drops have been proven effective through clinical trials. There are no human clinical trials because you can't have an FDA trial until you know what's in that bottle. Biological eye drops are entirely piggybacking on the idea of autologous serum tears to establish the idea that they will be effective in the minds of patients and eye care providers. You really need to beware of testimonials, white papers, and celebrity endorsements, manufacturer statements that imply Food and Drug Administration oversight, manufacturer statements that imply that the Food and Drug Administration doesn't care, and long lists of scientific references that are irrelevant. And I have seen all of these deceptive marketing techniques out there on the internet as relates to biological eye drops. Misconception number 3, and the one that really irks me the most. Biological eye drops are prescription eye drops. Well, in my world, and I think in your world too, prescribed is generally understood to mean requiring a prescription. And somewhere on that drug is going to be the symbol RX only. The FDA actually has a definition of a prescription drug: prescribed by a doctor, bought at a pharmacy, prescribed and intended to be used by one person, and regulated by the Food and Drug Administration through the new drug application or the biologic licensing application. So that's pretty discreet in my mind. You need 4 magic words on Daily Med: human prescription drug label. If there are no magic words, it is not a real prescription drug. That being the case, what does your doctor actually mean by prescribed if they say they're going to prescribe a biological eye drop? Well, do they mean this is a fully FDA-approved eye drop that she is prescribing, just like Restasis, antibiotic drops, steroid drops, glaucoma drops? Or does your doctor mean that this is a biological eye drop that he is recommending? You know, we used to prescribe bed rest. Well, nobody thought you had to go to the pharmacy to get bed rest. It was just kind of slang doctor lingo, sometimes almost joking. And frankly, I'd love to have my PCP prescribe bed rest for me, put it on a note to my employer, and I could put my feet up for a couple days. Get over my annoyance over the biological eye drop industry. This is a screenshot of one manufacturer describing their product as prescription only. It's not prescription only. Same manufacturer is using the word prescribe in multiple places, and this is not why I went to medical school. The manufacturer is also using the word dispense, but dispensing from a doctor's office. Licensed pharmacies dispense FDA-approved drugs. Doctors' offices sell unapproved products. A doctor who is selling you an FDA-approved eye drop is actually breaking the law unless they also have a state provider dispensing license, which is why you'll see on the sample bottles of medications that you might be given as a trial in doctors' offices the clear description, sample not for resale. A different manufacturer has better lawyers, and they're using the word recommend instead of the word prescribe. But then they play this joke: online script form. Seriously, who are you trying to fool? Clues to non-FDA approved eye drops: very straightforward. Purchased at your eye care provider's office. Purchased and shipped directly from the manufacturer. If this is how you're obtaining these magical eye drops, they are not FDA approved. Don't be fooled. Let's compare autologous serum versus biological eye drops in detail. Remember, autologous serum tears Your blood is converted to your serum tears. You start with a liquid and you end up with a liquid. The unwanted elements are easily filtered out. The tears are made one personal batch at a time in a licensed compounding pharmacy. Clinical reports in reputable journals, not FDA trials, show benefit from autologous serum tears. Biological eye drops, placentas from strangers, you're turning a solid into a liquid. The unwanted elements require hard work to remove, and they're made one lot at a time at a processing facility. Testimonials and manufacturer-sponsored reports allege benefit. That's a fresh placenta down there on the lower right-hand corner. Let's take a look at the fine print on this miraculous matrix. One manufacturer has a matrix comprised of hyaluronic acid, cytokines, growth factors, blah, 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 blah. Let's consider each one of their assertions in detail. First, they assert that hyaluronic acid is useful for lubrication, which is true. They then suggest that cytokines will have possible benefit for inflammation reduction, so there's a qualifier, and growth factors may have a potential for cell repair, also a qualifier. And these all work together to create a miraculous matrix, to which I say, really? What's really miraculous is how much they charge. And let's get back to that information for doctors thing. What do profit margins look like? I think the profit margin's pretty miraculous. Misconception number 4. Biological drops are regulated like over-the-counter drops. Not. Biological eye drop products contain complex protein mixtures derived from human reproductive organs and/or fluids. And these mixtures are regulated by the Food and Drug Administration's Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research. Manufacturers try to work around this in a variety of ways. One of the things they'll say is that their eye drops are what's known as an HCT/P. This stands for human cell or tissue derived product. HCTPs are regulated by the Center for Biological Evaluation and Research. It is true that some HCTP do not require full and complete Food and Drug Administration approval. Biological eye drops from placenta do not fall into that exempt category. Placenta is a human tissue, so it is an HCTP, but there is a major transformation required to turn placenta into eye drops. It's not autologous because it's not your own placenta. Therefore, CBER is in charge. It is regulated as a prescription drug, not over-the-counter, and must undergo new biologic license clinical trials. How about biological eye drops from amniotic fluid? Well, guess what? Amniotic fluid is not an HCTP. It's considered a secreted product. CBER is still in charge. It's still regulated as a prescription drug and still must undergo the full new biologic license clinical trials process. Here's a special piece of deceptive disclosure. One manufacturer is actually quoting chapter and verse from the regulations regarding HCTPs. What do they say? Well, they say that their drop is derived from amniotic fluid, which is true. It's not considered to be an HCTP, which is true, and is regulated as a non-HCTP biologic. Well, that's true too. But notice that's where they end. There's a period. But really what they needed was a comma. And this information. It's regulated as a non-HCTP biologic by the Food and Drug Administration, CBER, requires a new biologic license application, and cannot be lawfully marketed and sold until FDA approved. I mean, I think it's really kind of funny. Manufacturer number 1 says, amniotic fluid is not an HCTP, so when we bottle it, we didn't make a drug, but it requires a prescription. But our product is not on Daily Med under human prescription drug label, so not really. What this means is the whole prescription thing is a marketing trick. Manufacturer number 2 says, placenta is a human tissue, so placental protein mixture is an HCTP. So when we bottle placenta-derived proteins, we didn't make a real drug because those are unnatural chemicals. Thus, our product is actually over-the-counter on Daily Med. But that, doesn't quite work. So what we did was we listed the placental proteins as an inactive ingredient to slide it past the FDA. So you just paid $200 for a bottle of glycerin with inactive placental proteins. If you really want to read about it, HCTP for geeks, the Code of Federal Regulations. This is the title and chapter that you'll need to review easily accessed online. But do you really want to use these eye drops? Here's an unapproved drug. This is what it will look like on Daily Med. Human prescription drug label. Marketing status is unapproved drug other. And the disclaimer: has not been found to be safe or effective by the Food and Drug Administration. Misconception number 5. Biological eye drops are shown to remain sterile during use. As an eye care professional, I have a very significant concern about the possibility of substantial bacterial contamination. Biological eye drops contain no preservatives of any kind, and this is a marketing feature, part of the whole so-called natural movement of self-care. And the liquid is bottled in a regular eye drop bottle, not a multi-drop preservative-free dropper bottle. For more information on these issues and this concern, please see the video, Preservative-Free Eye Drops. I think that biological tears may represent a bacteria buffet in a bottle. There's stuff in there that bacteria like to eat, no preservatives. The drops are marketed for storage at room temperature, and they're also marketed for long-term use of one bottle. What do bacteria like to eat? Well, they love to eat amino acids, and proteins are composed of amino acids. And certain bacteria can actually secrete enzymes outside of themselves which will cause those proteins to break down. One of those is Staph epidermidis, which is a very common commensal bacteria on skin. Bacteria also like to eat sugar. Glycerin in an eye drop is the same as glycerol, the molecule, and glycerol is a carbohydrate. Some very, very bad bacteria are known to use glycerol very efficiently as a food source. Pure glycerol will kill bacteria, but dilute glycerol is a yummy food. So remember this: just because it starts sterile and the manufacturer asserts that there's a certificate of sterility does not mean that your biological tear stays sterile. In that bottle are 2 important sources of food for bacteria, a carbohydrate and amino acid source. And there's no way to prevent contamination. Let's do a little compare and contrast. Lumify is produced by Bausch & Lomb, and they're big pharma, and you might think they're evil, but they've been in the game for a really long time, and they know how to not make mistakes. Lumify contains glycerin, that's the vehicle. It's preserved with the evil preservative benzalkonium chloride, but benzalkonium chloride is actually not evil if it's preventing significant contamination. Bausch & Lomb acknowledges the contamination risk specifically and says, you need to throw this away after 3 months. And let me tell you, if you're only using Lumify every couple days during allergy season, there may be a whole lot of liquid left in that bottle. But nonetheless, they want you to chuck it, not because it's expired or it's gone flat, but because they're pretty concerned that it may be filled with germs, despite the presence of benzalkonium chloride. Let's contrast that with one of our biological eye drop manufacturers. Bottle is filled with bacteria nutrients, glycerin 0.4%, and a proprietary protein blend, which is behind that dark blue box. It contains no preservatives. The website says it can be stored at room temperature, and it can be used for 90 days. So on the one hand, you have Bausch & Lomb saying that Lumify, which is preserved, has to be thrown out after 90 days. And on the other hand, you have this biological eye drop manufacturer suggesting that a non-preserved eye drop can be thrown out after 90 days. I think that you can see that the biological eye drop presents a significantly greater risk of substantial bacterial contamination. You really can't have the same storage and use conditions for a preserved and a non-preserved product, especially if the non-preserved product is bottled in an ordinary dropper bottle without a multi-dose preservative-free dropper cap. Conclusions about biological eye drops. First, they are a recent entry into the dry eye market. They're not FDA approved and should be. There's no proven safety, especially with the concern for bacterial contamination. There's no proven benefit, and they are not legally an over-the-counter drop. There's been really intense marketing, direct-to-consumer, trade journals for MDs and optometrists, and a clearly marketed opportunity for profit-making office sales. There's very deceptive internet marketing, which co-opts the language of true prescription drugs using words like prescribed and dispensed. And manufacturers misrepresent the intent of FDA regulations or provide partial quotations to give patients a sense that these drugs have the same level of safety and efficacy of a true, fully approved FDA drug. I hope this information has been helpful to you as you make self-care and purchasing decisions to manage your dry eye.